तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। ओम गणानान्त्वा गणपतिगं वामहे कविं कवीनाश्रवस्त्रमं ज्येष्ठराजं ब्रह्मणान् ब्रह्मणस्पदानुशृण्वोति विश्वेदसादनम्। ओम महागणाधिपतये नमः। ओम महागणपतये नमः। ओम महागणाधिपतये नमः। ओम केशवाय नमः। ओम नारायणाय नमः। ओम माधवाय नमः। ओम गोविंदाय नमः। ओम विष्णुवे नमः। सूदनाय नमः। त्रिविक्रमाय नमः। वामनाय नमः। श्रीधराय नमः। ऋषिकेशाय नमः। पद्मनाभाय नमः। दामोदराय नमः। संकर्षणाय नमः। वासुदेवाय नमः। प्रद्युम्नाय नमः। अनिरुद्धाय नमः। पुरुषोत्तमाय नमः। अदोक्षाय नमः। नारसिंहाय नमः। अच्युताय नमः। जनार्दनाय नमः। उपेन्द्राय नमः। हरे नमः। श्री कृष्णाय नमः। हरि ओम. We came to the 33rd chapter of Mahabhagavata Puranam. In this 33rd chapter, we are discussing about Maha Rasa Kreeda of Lord Krishna. It is the Gopis were all before they were all big saints of devotees of Lord Narayana. So they wanted to come as a Gopis in the Dwapara Yuga in service to Lord Krishna. That's how we have to understand the Rasa Leela Kreeda is a transcendental affair of Lord Narayana in the presence of Gopis. So we need to respect this as an important aspect of the Rasa Leela Kreeda is a transcendental manifestation of Krishna Leela. We need to understand this is something which we need to agree. The modern people think so many different views, and we need to understand that it is Krishna's advice given for the Gopis is very important in this part of the Mahabhagavata Purana. Yesterday, when we are doing the reading of the Bhagavata, the Wi-Fi went off and some of the chapters were not covered. Lord Krishna has come back and made Gopis very happy. And Lord Krishna is advising various things to Gopis. Supreme Personality of Godhead said, so-called friends who show affection for each other only to benefit themselves are actually selfish. So Krishna is explaining who is selfish, who is not selfish. The parents' affection, like a father and mother affection, is a permanent affection to children. They are not selfish. But here, the Lord Krishna should be considered as a parent of all the humanities. So it is not selfish. His affection to the Gopis are not selfish. They have no true friendship. They have no true friendship, nor are they allowing the true principles of religion. See, the friends who show affection for each other only to benefit themselves are actually selfish. These sort of affection is called selfish affection. They have no true friendship, nor are they following the true principles of religion. Indeed, if they did not expect benefit from themselves, they would not reciprocate. Lord here reminds the Gopis that in pure loving friendship, there is no sense of self-interest, but rather only love for one's friend. So, bhajantya bhajanto yeve kurunaha pitaro tata dharmo nirapavodosto saurada cha samudhyaya. Here, my dear slender-waisted Gopis, some people are genuinely merciful, are like parents, naturally affectionate towards their children and family. Such persons who devotedly serve even those who fail to reciprocate with them are following the true faultless path of religion. See, the mother and father give so much affection to children, but sometimes children may not reciprocate the same affection to the mother. So here, the child who is not reciprocating the affection to the mother is at fault. He is not good. But the parents have given affectionate to all the children. Such persons who devotedly serve even those who fail to reciprocate to them are following the true faultless path of religion, and they are true well-wishers. Then there are those individuals who are spiritually self-satisfied, materially fulfilled, or by nature ungrateful or simply envious of superiors. Such persons will not love even those who love them. What to speak of those who are inimical? Some people, being spiritually self-satisfied, do not reciprocate others' affection because they want to avoid entanglement in mundane dealings. Other persons do not reciprocate simply out of envy of arrogance, and still others fail to reciprocate because they are materially satisfied and thus uninterested in new material opportunities. Lord Krishna patiently explains all these things to the Gopis in Rasa Leela, Kreeda. But the reason I do not immediately reciprocate the affection of living beings even when they worship me. Sometimes Lord Krishna is not able to immediately reciprocate the affection of living beings, even they worship Krishna. O Gopis, is that I want to intensify their loving devotion. They then become like a poor man who has gained some wealth and then lost it, and who thus becomes so anxious about it that he can think of nothing else. I want to intensify their loving devotion. O Gopis, is that I want to intensify their loving devotion. That's why I'm not reciprocating affection immediately. They then become like a poor man who has gained some wealth and then lost it. And that's what Gopis happened. They got Krishna and Krishna disappeared. They became poor because Krishna disappeared. That's because Krishna is not reciprocating immediately, but he wants to intensify their loving devotion. That's why he disappeared and came back. And who thus becomes so anxious about it, then that he can think of nothing else of Krishna. Lord Krishna states in Bhagavad Gita, Ye yatha mam prapadyante tam tataiva bhajami aham. As people approach me, I reciprocate with them accordingly. And even if the Lord is approached by someone with devotion to intensify the devotee's love, the Lord may not immediately reciprocate fully. In fact, the Lord is truly reciprocating. After all, a sincere devotee always prays for the Lord. Please help me to love you purely. Therefore, the Lord is so-called neglect is actually the fulfillment of the devotee's prayer. The devotee thinks that the God has not given any blessings, but it is not true. Lord Krishna intensifies our love for him by apparently separating himself from us. And the result is that we achieve what we really wanted and prayed for, intense love for the absolute truth, Krishna. Thus, Lord Krishna's apparent negligence is actually his thoughtful reciprocation and the fulfillment of our deepest and purest desire. According to Acharyas, as Lord Krishna began to speak this verse, the gopis looked at one another with squinting eyes, trying to hide the smiles breaking out on their faces. Even as Lord Krishna was speaking, the gopis had begun to realize that he was bringing them to the highest perfection of loving service. So the gopis realized Lord Krishna is bringing them to the highest perfection of loving service in this Rasa Leela Kreeda. My dear girls, understanding that simply for my sake you had rejected the authority of worldly opinion, of the Vedas and your relatives, I acted as I did only to increase your attachment to me. Even when I removed myself from your sight by suddenly disappearing, I never stopped loving you. Therefore, my beloved gopis, please do not harbor any bad feelings towards me, your beloved. So Lord Krishna explained that although he disappeared from the scene, he is not stopped his loving the gopis. Here the Lord indicates that though the gopis were already perfect in their love for him, still to inconceivably increase their perfection and show an example for the world, he acted as he did. I am not able to repay my debt for your spotless service, even within the lifetime of Brahma. Your connection with me is beyond reproach. You have worshipped me, cutting off all domestic ties which are difficult to break for anybody. Therefore, please let your own glorious deeds be your compensation. Therefore, Krishna says, please let your own glorious deeds be your compensation. The translation and word meanings for this verse are taken from Srila Prabhupada's English rendering of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. In conclusion, the gopis became eternally glorious by their behavior in the Lord's temporary absence, and the mutual love between them and the Lord was wonderfully enhanced. This is the perfection of Krishna and his loving devotees. Thus, and the purports of the humble servants of his divine grace, Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada to the 10th canto, 32nd chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam entitled Reunion. This is what the missing part in the yesterday's discussion. That's why I covered again. Now we are going to read the 33rd chapter, Maha Rasa Leela dance. Here, Krishna blessed the gopis with all they want, what they wanted. This chapter describes Lord Sri Krishna Rasa dance. It's called Maha Rasa Kreeda, which he enjoyed with his beloved girlfriends in the forest of along the Yamuna River. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, is most expert in the knowledge of transcendental modes. In the company of the gopis, who were tightly bound to him by the ropes of affection and totally dedicated to his service, the Lord expanded himself into numerous forms. The gopis became intoxicated with their enthusiasm to enjoy the Rasa Leela dance, and thus they began satisfying Krishna's sense by singing, dancing, and gesturing amorously. The sweet voices of gopis filled all the directions. Even after Lord Krishna manifested himself in numerous forms, each gopi thought he was standing next to Lord Krishna. Gradually, the gopis became fatigued from the continuous dancing and singing, and each of them placed her arm on the shoulder of the Krishna standing beside her. Some gopis smelled and kissed Krishna's arms, which bore the fragrance of the lotus and was anointed with the sandalwood paste. Others put Krishna's hand on their bodies, and yet others give Krishna pleasure by embracing him lovingly. Lord Krishna, being supreme absolute truth, is the only actual enjoyer and object of enjoyment. Although he is one without a second, he expands himself into many forms to increase his personal pastimes. Therefore, great scholars say that Krishna's Rasa Leela is like a child's playing with his own reflection. So he became multiple Krishna. He is one. Every Krishna, every Gopi has got one Krishna. In the similar way, they dance. The Krishna is self-satisfied and fully endowed with inconceivable transcendental opulences. When he exhibits such pastimes as the Rasa Leela, all living beings from Brahmaloka and Devaloka came down to the blades of grass, became merged in the ocean of astonishment. When Maharaja Parikshit heard the narration of Krishna's conjugal pastimes with the gopis, which superficially resemble the activities of a lusty, wanton persons, he expressed a doubt to the great devotee Sri Sukadeva Goswami. Sukadeva dispelled this doubt by stating, since Sri Krishna is the absolute enjoyer, such pastimes as they can never be contaminated by any fault. But if anyone other than Supreme Personality of Godhead tries to enjoy such pastime, he will suffer the same fate that someone other than Lord Rudra would suffer if he attempted to drink an ocean of poison. The people like Maha Parameshwara and Krishna, they are transcendental. They can do a lot of things which we cannot do. Human beings, we cannot do. When Lord Rudra can drink poison and he's all right. Moreover, even one who only thinks of imitating Lord Krishna's Rasa Leela will certainly suffer misfortune. So one should not repeat or one should not imitate Lord Krishna's Rasa Leela dance. That is a misfortune. The supreme absolute truth, Sri Krishna, is present within the hearts of all living entities as their indwelling witness. When, out of his mercy, he exhibits his intimate pastimes to his devotees, these activities are never besmirched by mundane imperfection. The modern people thinking in a different way is wrong. Lord Krishna is transcendental. He is already present in the hearts of all the people. Any living being who hears of the spontaneous loving attraction of the gopis felt Lord Krishna will have his desires for material sense gratification destroyed at the root and will develop his natural prosperity for serving Supreme Lord, the spiritual master, and the Lord's devotees. This is very difficult to understand sometimes. Now, we will go to the deep rails of this 33rd chapter called Maha Rasa Kreeda. It starts with the Shuka Uvacha. Shuka Brahma is telling the whole episode to Parikshit Maharaja. Shuka Uvacha Ittam Bhagavato Gopyaha Shrutva Vachaha Supeshalaha Juhurvira Rajaha Juhurvirahajam Tapam Tadam Gopachitao Shisha Tadam Gopachita Shisha. Here, Shuka Maharshi said, when the covered girls heard the Supreme Personality of Godhead speak these most charming words, they forgot their distress caused by separation from him. When Lord Krishna disappeared from the scene, they were distressed. They were shouting and crying for him. When he came back, the distress is gone. By separation from him, the feeling of separation is gone. Touching his transcendental limbs, they felt all their desires fulfilled. There, on the Yamuna banks, Lord Govinda then began the pastime of the Rasa Leela dance in the company of those jewels among women, the faithful gopis, who joyfully linked their arms together. Ratsotsava is called Ratsotsava. Ratsotsava sampravritto gopi mandala manditaha yogeshwarena krishnena tasam madhya dvayordayo pravishtena grihitina kante swarikatam striyaha. Yam manerenya bhastavat vimana chatasankalam divakaso sadharanam motsukya prahatatmanam. The meaning of these two shlokas, the festive of Maha Rasa Leela dance commenced with the gopis arrayed in a circle. Lord Krishna expanded himself and entered between each pair of gopis. And there is one Krishna between the gopis. And as that, the master of mystic power placed his arms around their necks. Each girl thought he was standing next to Krishna alone. The gods and their wives were overwhelmed with eagerness to witness the Maha Rasa Leela dance from Devaloka. And they soon crowded in the sky, and their hundreds of celestial airplanes were there in the sky. Srila Bilva Mangala Thakura has written the following verse about the Rasa Leela dance. Lord Madhava was situated between each pair of gopis, and a gopi was situated between each pair of his manifestations. And Lord Sri Krishna, the son of Devaki, also appeared in the middle of the circle, playing upon his flute and singing also. So the center of the circle also Lord Krishna present and playing the flute, and in between the gopis also Lord Krishna is playing with them in the Rasa Leela dance. Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakura points out that the gopis, maddened by love, were unable to understand that Lord Sri Krishna had expanded himself so he could personally dance with each of them. Each gopi saw one manifestation of Lord Krishna. The gods and their wives, however, could see all his different manifestations as they watched the Rasa Leela dance from their airplanes in the sky, and thus they were completely astonished. All the gods were seeing Rasa Leela dance, were astonished the way Lord Krishna expanded himself, so many Krishnas. Kettle drums then resounded in the sky while flowers rained down, and the chief Gandharvas and their wives sang Lord Krishna's spotless glories. Can you imagine? Maha Rasa Leela dance is going on in the Yamuna river, and all gods and Gandharvas, Kinnaras came and put shower, rain of showers and rain of flowers on the Lord Krishna from the heaven. Kettle drums sounded all over the sky, while flowers rained down, and the chief Gandharvas and their wives sang Lord Krishna's spotless glories. As stated here, Lord Krishna's glory in dancing in the Rasa Leela dance is a pure spiritual bliss. The gods in the heaven, in charge of maintaining the propriety of the universe, ecstatically accepted the Rasa Leela dance as the ultimate religious affair, completely different from the perverted reflection of romance we find in this mundane world. The text 5, Tato Dundubayo, Nedur Neputa, Pushta Vrishtiyaha, Jugu Gandharva Patayo, Sastri Kastadrasho Malam. Valayanam Nupurina, Valayanam Nupuranam Kinkinancha Yoshitam, Sapriyanam, Bucha Bustumalo Rasa Mandale. A tumultuous sound arose from the armlets, ankle bells, and waist bells of the gopis as they sported with their beloved Krishna in the circle of Maha Rasa Leela dance. In the midst of the dancing gopis, Lord Krishna appeared most brilliant, like an exquisite sapphire in the midst of the golden ornaments. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur states that Devaki, besides being the name of Vasudeva's wife, is also a name of Mother Yashoda, as stated in the Adi Purana. Devanami Nanda Bharyaya Yashoda Devaki Cha. The wife of Nanda has two names, Yashoda and Devaki. Yashoda also got name of Devaki now, according to this. As the gopis sang in praise of Lord Krishna, their feet danced, their hands gestured, and their eyebrows moved with playful smiles on the Krishna. With their braids and belts tied, their waist bending, their faces perspiring, the garments on their breast moving this way and that way, and their earrings swinging on their cheeks. Lord Krishna's young consorts shone like streaks of lightning in the mass of clouds. Sridhara Swami explains that according to the analogy of lightning flashing in clouds, the perspiration on the lovely faces of the gopis resembled drops of mist, and their singing resembled thunder. The word agrantaya may also be read agrantaya, meaning loosened. This would indicate that although the gopis began the dance with their hair and belts tightly drawn, these gradually slackened and loosened because of their dance. Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti points out that the gopis were expert at exhibiting mudras. precise hand gestures that express feelings or convey meanings associated with them with the theme of performance. Thus, sometimes Krishna and the Gopis would artistically move their interlocked arms together, and sometimes they would separate arms and exhibit mudras to act out of the meaning of the songs they were singing. The word Padanyasaya indicates that the Gopis artistically and gracefully place the steps of their dancing feet in an enchanting way, and the words Sa Samaitair Bru Vilasair indicate that the romantic movements of their eyebrows smiling with love and were most charming to behold. Eager to enjoy conjugal love, their throats colored with various pigments, the gopis sang loudly and danced. They were overjoyed by Krishna's touch, and they sang songs all together that filled the entire universe. According to an authoritative book on music called Sangeeta Sara Twanta, Twanta Eva Raga Suryota Jiva Jataya Teshu Saudasha Sahasri Pura Gopi Kritavara. There are as many musical ragas as there are species of life. Among these ragas are 16,000 principal ones, which were manifested by the gopis. Thus, the gopis created 16,000 different ragas or musical modes, and these have subsequently been disseminated throughout the world. The words Yad Gitenam Avratam also indicate that even today devotees throughout the world sing the praises of Krishna, following the examples of the gopis. One gopi, joining Lord Mukunda in his singing, sang pure melodious tones that rose harmoniously above his. Krishna was pleased and showed great appreciation for her performance, saying, "Excellent, excellent." Then another gopi repeated the same melody, but in special metrical pattern, and Krishna praised her also. These are the activities of Rasa Leela dance. When one gopi grew tired from the Rasa Leela dance, she turned to Krishna, standing at her side, holding a baton and grasped his shoulder with her arm. The dancing had loosened her bracelets and the flowers in her hair. Sri Krishna honored the gopis for their dancing and singing, and in this verse we see how gopis responded by dealing intimately, confidently with him. Here, a tired gopi held onto Krishna's shoulder with her arm resting against him. Srila Jiva Goswami explains that the word Gada in this verse indicates a baton suitable for dancing master. Lord Krishna brought this item of paraphernalia to enhance his enjoyment of the Rasa Leela dance. Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti states that the gopi mentioned here is Srimati Radharani, whereas the two gopis mentioned in the previous verse are in order Vishaka and Lalita. So they point at the name of Srimati Radharani in this sloka. Lord Krishna brought this item of paraphernalia to enhance his enjoyment of the Rasa Leela. Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti states that the gopi mentioned here is Srimati Radharani, whereas the two gopis mentioned in the previous are in order Vishaka and Lalita. Upon the shoulder of one gopi, Krishna placed his arm, whose natural blue lotus fragrance was mixed with that of the sandalwood pulp, appointing it. As the gopis relished that fragrance, her bodily hair stood on end in jubilation, and she kissed his arm. Next, Krishna's cheek, one gopi put her own. Next to Krishna's cheek, one gopi put her own, beautified by the effulgence of her earrings, which glittered as she danced. Krishna then carefully gave her the betel nut he was chewing. Another gopi became fatigued as she danced and sang, the bells on her ankles and waist twinkling. So she placed upon her breast the comforting lotus hand of Lord Achyuta, who was standing by her side. So she placed upon her breast comforting lotus hand of Lord Achyuta, who was standing by her side. This must be Radharani. Having attained as their intimate lover Lord Achyuta, the exclusive consort of the goddess of fortune, the Gopis enjoyed a great pleasure. They sang his glories as he held their necks with his arms. Gopyo labdhachutam kantam sriya ekanta vallabham grahita kantasthurdhabhyam gayatan savijrahire gayantastra vijayhire. Karnotpalalaka vidanka kapolagan vaktastriyo malayonu paranat Gopyam samam Bhagavata nandrutam swakesha swastasrajo brahmara gayaka rasa gostvam. Enhancing the beauty of the Gopis' faces were the lotus flowers behind their ears, the locks of hair decorating their cheeks, and drops of perspiration. The reverberation of their armlets and ankle bells made a loud musical sound, and their chaplets scattered. Thus the Gopis danced with the Supreme Lord in the arena of Rasa Leela dance in the bank of river Yamuna as swarms of bees sang in accompaniment. In this way, Lord Krishna, the original Lord Narayana, master of the goddess of fortune, who blessed the saints in the previous age, accepted saints as Gopis in Dwapara, took pleasure in the company of the young women of Raja by embracing them, caressing them, and glancing lovingly at them as he smiled his broad, playful smiles. It was just as if a child were playing with his own reflection. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur comments as follows on this verse. Lord Krishna alone is the supreme absolute truth, and his potencies are unlimited. All these potencies taking personal forms engage Lord Krishna in his pastimes. Just as the opulent manifestation of his own supreme transcendental potency manifests all the countless potencies of the Lord, so in the Rasa Leela dance, Krishna manifests himself as many times as there are various potencies represented by the Gopis. Everything is Krishna, but by his desire, his spiritual energy, Yogamaya manifests the Gopis. When his internal potency, Yogamaya, thus produces such a pastime, for the enhancement of his transcendental emotions, it is just like a young boy playing with his own reflection. But since these pastimes are created by his spiritual potency, they are eternal and self-manifesting. Their senses overwhelmed by the joy of having his physical association. The Gopis could not prevent their hair, their dresses, and the clothes covering their breasts from becoming disheveled. Their garlands and ornaments scattered. O hero of the Kuru dynasty, that is Parikshit Raj, Kuru of the dynasty. This sort of disturbance noticed. The wives of the gods, observing Lord Krishna's playful activities from their aeroplanes in the heaven, were entranced and became agitated with the lust. Indeed, even the moon and his entourage, the stars became astonished. The moon and other gods sometimes felt jealous of Krishna, expanding himself as many times as they were covered women to associate with the Supreme Lord, though self-satisfied, playfully enjoyed their company. As Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti points out, it has already been explained that Lord Krishna is eternally free from all material desire, perfect on the platform of spiritual self-satisfaction. Lord Krishna is not having a desire materially. It is a transcendental affair. It's a transcendental reciprocation affection towards Gopis. It's not a material desire of Lord Krishna at all, perfect on the platform of spiritual self-satisfaction. Seeing that Gopis were fatigued from conjugal enjoyment, my dear King, merciful Krishna, lovingly wiped their faces with his comforting hand. The Gopis honored their hero with smiling glances, sweetened by the beauty of their cheeks and the effulgence of their curly locks and glittering golden earrings. Overjoyed from the touch of his fingernails, they enchanted the glories of his all auspicious transcendental pastimes. The Gopis became more happy, overjoyed from the touch of his fingernails. They chanted the glories of Lord Krishna, all auspicious transcendental pastimes. Lord Krishna's garland had been crushed during his conjugal dalliance with the Gopis and colored vermilion by the kumkum powder on their breast. To dispel the fatigue of the Gopis, Krishna entered the water of the Yamuna, followed swiftly by bees who were singing like the best of Gandharvas. He appeared like a lordly elephant entering the water to relax in the company of his consorts. Indeed, Lord had transgressed all worldly and Vedic morality, just as a powerful elephant might break the dikes in a paddy field. My dear king, in the water Krishna found himself being splashed on all sides by the laughing Gopis, who looked at him with love and affection. As the gods worshipped him by showering flowers from their heaven, the self-satisfied Lord Krishna took pleasure in playing like the king of the elephants. Then the Lord strolled through a small forest on the bank of Yamuna. This forest was filled to its limits with breezes carrying the fragrances of all the flowers growing on the land and in the water, followed by his entourage of bees and beautiful women. Lord Krishna appeared like an intoxicated elephant with his she-elephants. According to Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti, it is implicit here that after playing in the water, Lord Krishna had his body massaged and that he then dressed himself in his favorite clothing before resuming his pastimes with the Gopis. Although the Gopis were firmly attached to Lord Krishna, whose desires are always fulfilled, the Lord was not internally affected by any mundane sex desire. Still, to perform his pastimes, the Lord took advantage of all those moonlit autumn nights which inspire poetic descriptions of transcendental affairs. It is difficult to translate into English the word Rasa or Rasa Leela, which indicates the spiritual bliss derived from one's loving relationship with Lord Krishna. That bliss is experienced in the midst of spiritual pastimes with the Lord and his devotees. It is the spiritual pastimes of Lord Krishna and his devotees. Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti explains that great Vaishnava poets like Vyasa, Parashara, Jayadeva, Lila Shuka, Bilvamangala Thakura, Govindacharya, and Srila Gopa Goswami have tried their best, their poetry to describe the conjugal affairs of Lord Krishna. These descriptions are never complete. However, since the Lord's pastimes are unlimited, thus the attempt to glorify such pastimes is still going on and will go on forever. Lord Krishna arranged an extraordinary season of beautiful autumn nights to enhance his loving affairs, and those autumn nights have inspired transcendental poets since time immemorial. Parikshit Maharaja said, "O Shuka Maharshi, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, the Lord of the universe, has descended to this earth along with his plenary portion to destroy irreligion, adharma, and re-establish religious principles and dharma. Indeed, he is the original speaker, follower, and guardian of moral laws. How then could he have violated them by touching other men's wives?" So this is a common man, ordinary common man in the modern age can question this. And that Shuka Maharshi is telling answer to this question. Shuka Goswami was speaking. King Parikshit noticed that some persons seated in the assembly on the bank of Ganges were harboring doubt about Lord's activities. These doubtful persons were karmis, jnanis, and others who were not devotees of the Lord. To clear up their doubts, King Parikshit asked this question on their behalf. There are so many people who are materialistically desires, and they were having a doubt. That's why King Parikshit asked this question on their behalf. This discussion gives an explanation. Lord Parikshit is asking this question on behalf of the Kali Yuga people to get the clarification to all the modern people. Who faithful upholder of woes, please destroy your doubt by explaining to us what purpose the self-satisfied Lord Krishna of the Yadus had in mind when he behaved so contemptibly. It is clear to the enlightened that these doubts will arise in the minds of hearts of persons unfamiliar with the transcendental pastimes of the Lord Krishna. Therefore, since time immemorial, great sages and enlightened kings like Parikshit Maharaj have openly raised these questions to provide the authority to answer for all posterity. Now, the Shuka is answering the question. Shuka says the status of powerful controllers is not harmed by any apparently audacious transgression of morality we may see in them, for they are just like fire, which devours everything fed into it and remains unpolluted. Great potent personalities are not ruined by an apparent transgression of moral principles. Sridhar Swami mentions the examples of Brahma, Indra, Soma, Vishwamitra, and others. A fire devours all that is fed into it, but the fire does not change its nature. Similarly, a great personality does not fall from his position by an irregularity in behavior. In the following verse, however, Shuka Maharshi makes it clear that if we try to imitate the great personalities ruling the universe, the result will be catastrophic. So, Shuka Maharshi is telling all the people in Kali Yuga who are listening to this Bhagavad Puran, they should not imitate Lord Krishna in this manner, because Lord Krishna is a transcendental affair. He can expand as many number of Krishna as he wants to satisfy every Gopi in the Rasa Leela dance, but nobody in the modern world can do it. That's why it's spiritual and transcendental. One who is not a great controller should never imitate the behavior of ruling personalities, even mentally. If out of foolishness an ordinary person does imitate such behavior, he will simply destroy himself, just as a person who is not Rudra would destroy himself if he tried to drink any ocean of poison. See, Rudra, that is Lord Parameshwara, he drank poison which came in the Samudra Mathana, and he was all right. But similarly, our modern people cannot imitate like Rudra. So the great controller, they can do. Shiva or Rudra once drank an ocean of poison, and the result was that an attractive blue mark appeared on his neck. That's why he became Nilakanta. But if we were to drink even a drop of such poison, we would die immediately. Just as we should not imitate this pastime of Shiva's, we should not imitate Lord Krishna's activities with the Gopis. We should clearly understand that while Lord Krishna certainly descends to demonstrate religious principles, he also descends to demonstrate that he is God and we are not. That also must be demonstrated and understood by the devotees. The Lord enjoys with his internal potency and thus attracts us to the spiritual platform. We should not try to imitate Krishna or Rudra, for we will suffer severely. The statements of the Lord's empowered servants are always true, and the acts they perform are exemplary when consistent with those statements. Therefore, one who is intelligent should carry out their instructions. The word Ishvara is usually defined in Sanskrit dictionaries as Lord, Master, Ruler. That is Krishna. It's also called Ishvara and also is capable, potent of perform. Srila Prabhupada often translated the word Ishvara as a controller, which brilliantly synthesizes the two fundamental concepts of Ishvara, namely a matter of a ruler and a potent person. A master who may be incompetent, but controller is a master or Lord who in fact makes these things to happen. Parameshwara, the supreme Ishvara, the supreme controller is of course Lord Krishna, the cause of all causes. Although people in general, especially in the Western countries, are not aware of the fact, powerful personalities control our universe. The modern impersonal concept of the universe depicts an almost totally lifeless cosmos in which the earth floats meaninglessly. Thus, we are left with the dubious ultimate purpose of preserving and reproducing our genetic code, which has its own ultimate purpose of adding another link to the meaningless chain of events and by grass reproducing itself. In contrast to this sterile, meaningless world concocted by ignorant materialists, the actual universe is full of life, personal life, and in fact, full of God also, who pervades and supports all that exists. The essence of reality is the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his personal relationship with the innumerable living beings, of whom we are samples. Some of the living beings are trapped in the illusion of materialism and identification with the material body, while others are liberated, aware of their eternal spiritual nature. A third class compromises those progressing in self-realization from the materialistic state of the ignorance to the enlightened state of Krishna consciousness. Reality is ultimately personal and divine, and therefore it is not surprising that as the Vedic literature reveals to us, our universe and other universes are managed by great personalities, just as our city, state, and country are managed by empowered personalities. When we democratically award a particular politician the right to govern, they vote for him because he has exhibited something we call leadership or ability. We think he will get the job done. In other words, it is only after an individual acquires the power to govern that we vote for him. Our vote does not make him a leader, but rather recognizes a power in him coming from some other sources. Thus, as Lord Krishna explains at the end of the 10th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, any living being exhibiting an extraordinary power, ability, or authority must have been empowered by the Lord himself or by the Lord's energy. The directly empowered by the Lord are devoted to him, and thus their power and influence spread goodness throughout the world, whereas those who are empowered by the Lord's illusory potency are in an indirect relationship with Krishna because they do not directly reflect his will. Of course, they do not reflect his own indirectly, since it is by Krishna's arrangement that the laws of the nature act upon ignorant living beings, gradually persuading them through their journey of many lifetimes to surrender to the Supreme Lord. So the devotees should surrender to the Supreme Lord Krishna. Thus, as the politicians create wars, false hopes, and innumerable passionate schemes for the materialistic persons who follow them, the politicians are indirectly carrying out the Lord's program of allowing the conditioned souls to experience the bitter fruit of godliness. My dear Prabhu, when these great persons who are free from false ego act piously in this world, they have no selfish motives to fulfill. And even when they act in apparent contradiction of the laws of piety, they are not subject to sinful reactions. How then could the Lord of all created beings, animals, men, and demigods, how then could the Lord of all created beings, animals, men, and gods have any connection with the piety and impiety that affects his subjective natures? Material activities never entangle the devotees of the Supreme Lord, who are fully satisfied by serving the dust of his lotus feet. Nor do material activities entangle those intelligent sages who have freed themselves from the bondage of the all fruitive reactions by the power of yoga. So, how could there be any question of bondage for the Lord himself, who assumes his transcendental forms according to his own sweet will? He who lives as the overseeing witness within the gopis and their husbands, and indeed within all embodied living beings, assumes forms in this world to enjoy transcendental pastimes. We certainly do not assume our bodies to enjoy transcendental pastimes as the Lord does. We eternal souls, we the eternal souls have accepted material bodies by force because of our foolish attempt to enjoy this material world. The Lord's forms are all eternal, spiritual existence and cannot be reasonably equated with our temporary flesh. Since Lord Krishna is the Supreme Lord, dwelling within the gopis, their so-called husbands, and all other living beings, what possible sin could there be on his part? If he embraces some of the beings he himself has created, what fault could there be if the Lord goes with the gopis to a secret place, since he already dwells within the most secret part of every living being, the core of the heart knowledge? When the Lord assumes a human-like body to show mercy to his devotees, he engages in such a pastimes as will attract those who hear about them to become dedicated to him. The coward men, bewildered by Krishna's illusory potency, thought their wives had remained home at their sides. Thus, they did not harbor any jealous feelings against Lord Krishna. Because the gopis loved Krishna exclusively, Yogamaya protected their relationship with the Lord at all times, even though they were married. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti quotes from the Ujjvala Nilamani as follows: the gopis, jealous husbands, consorted not with their wives, but with doubles manufactured by Yogamaya. Thus, these men never actually had any intimate contact with the divine ladies of the Praja. The gopis are the internal potency. The gopis are the internal energy of the Lord Krishna and can never belong to any other living being. Krishna arranged their apparent marriage to their men simply to create the excitement of Parakiya Rasa, the love between the married woman and her paramour. These activities are absolutely pure because they are the Lord's pastimes, and saintly persons since time immemorial have relished these supreme spiritual events. After an entire night of Brahma had passed, the Lord Krishna advised the gopis to return to their homes, although they did not wish to do so. The Lord's beloved consorts compiled with his command. In the Bhagavad Gita, 8th chapter, 17th sloka, Lord Krishna explains, by human calculation, 1,000 ages taken together is the duration of Brahma's one day. By human calculation, 1,000 ages taken together is the duration of Brahma's one day, and such also is the duration of his night. Thus, 1,000 ages entered within single 12-hour night, and then thus 1,000 ages entered within the single 12-hour night when Lord Krishna performed his Rasa Leela dance. Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti compares this inconceivable impression of time to the fact that many universes fit nearly within the 40-mile range of earthly Vrindavana. Or one may consider that Mother Yashoda could not encircle the small abdomen of child Krishna with numerous ropes, and that at another time he manifested many universes within his mouth. The transcendence of spiritual reality above and beyond mundane physics is concisely explained in Srila Gopa Goswami Lagu Bhagavatamrita. Anyone who faithfully hears or describes the Lord's playful affairs with the young Gopis of Vrindavana will attain Lord's pure devotional service. Thus, he will quickly become sober and conquer lust, the disease of the heart. The extraordinary power of Lord Krishna's conjugal pastimes is clearly revealed here. Qualitatively, the Lord's spiritual loving pastimes are the diametric opposite of material, lusty affairs, so much so that simply by hearing about the Lord's pastimes, a devotee conquers. By hearing or reading about the Lord's conjugal affairs has exactly the opposite effect because they are of the opposite nature, being purely spiritual. Therefore, it is by the costless mercy of Lord Krishna that he exhibits his Rasa Leela dance within this world. If we become attached to this narration, we will experience the bliss of spiritual love for Krishna and thus reject the perverted reflection of that love which is called lust, as nicely put by Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. Parama Drishpa Nivrattate. Ones who, having directly experienced Supreme, one will not return to material pleasure. इति श्रीमद् महाभागवत महापुराणे पारमहंस्यां संहितायां दशमस्कन्धे पूर्वार्धे रासक्रीडावर्णनं नामत्रयस्त्रिंशोऽध्यायः. That is the end of the 33rd chapter of Rasa Leela dance of Lord Krishna. This is purely transcendental and it is not materialistic desire. Lord Krishna is high above the materialistic desire. He is a transcendental man. He expanded himself for so many gopis, covered so many Krishnas arrived. His expansion made one Krishna for each one gopi in the Rasa Leela dance. Nobody can do that sort of thing. It's a Rasa Leela dance of transcendental nature of Lord Krishna. We should worship Krishna. Hare Rama, Hare Rama. Krishna, 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 Krishna. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare. Om Keshwaya Namaha, Narayana Namaha, Madhvaya Namaha, Govindaya Namaha, Vishnuve Namaha, Madhusudhanaya Namaha, Trivikramaya Namaha, Vamanaya Namaha, Sridharaya Namaha, Hrishikeshaya Namaha, Padmanabhaya Namaha, Damodaraya Namaha, Sankarshanaya Namaha, Vasudevaya Namaha, Pradyumnaya Namaha, Niruddhaya Namaha, Purushottamaya Namaha, Dokshaya Namaha, Narasimhaya Namaha, Achyutaya Namaha, Janadraya Namaha, Upendraya Namaha, Hare Namaha, Sri Krishna Namaha. नमोस्तनंताय सहस्रमूर्तये सहस्रपादाक्षरभव सहस्रनाम्ने पुरुषाष्टये सहस्रकोटियुगधारिणे नमः सहस्रकोटियुगधारिणे नमः आकाशात् परितम्यतागरसागरं सर्वदे नमस्कारः श्रीकेशं प्रियत्यो नमः सर्ववेदेशत्पुण्यं सर्वतीर्थेषु यत्फलं तत्फलं प्राप्तवासनात् वासुदेवस्य वासन्ते जयत्रयं सर्वभूतनिवासोऽस्ते वासुदेव नमोस्तुते इति कायेन वाचा मनसेन्द्रियैर्वा बुद्धात्मना वा प्रकृते स्वभावात् करोमि यद्यत् सकलं परस्मै नारायणायेति समर्पयामि नारायणायेति समर्पयामि. हरि ओम.